Paul, welcome.
Hey there, Artem. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Can you see me okay? Am I clear?
Yes, loud and clear in blue colors. So,
Blue color.
before we dive into it, just a reminder: please choose your language in the lower left corner so translation works better. It's right next to the camera. Should be at least.
So I'm in original or English? What am
Choose
I
English.
translating? Use English. Okay.
Choose English. Be original. Just like you always do. So, Paul, welcome to the conference. It's lovely to see you here. I'm going to be off, and just let me know when you need the slides.
Okay. All right. Um, Thanks, Artem. Thank you. Um, Welcome everybody, and thank you. Now, can turn off camera. All right. Can everyone see me? I'm getting a different look on the camera. So I can sort of almost, well, let me introduce myself. I'm the director of the Center for Narrative Studies, or otherwise known as Storywise, and our little sort of motto is shaping the stories that are shaping us, and and we kind of we've been around for, I don't know, 25 years, maybe more. We talk about the power of stories. We talk about how stories shape identity and destiny and community, and then how, when one understands those things, um, one can apply more effectively to situations of change or situations of conflict. And for many years, I worked internationally using that kind of theory of change in Northern Ireland and Ireland, in South Africa, and in Israel and Palestine. And then you see locally, I'm wearing my current community work that I do here in the local community here outside Washington, D.C. I run a local AmeriCorps program called Project Change, again, based upon the same model of a theory of change based around stories. So I'm so happy that, and I was listening to Rain and to Laura and Artem doing his delightful uh, discussion afterwards. Just to like to applaud Artem in this tough time of the way the world is shaping up right now, to have the energy, the inspiration, the perseverance to do this. I kind of that's a story in itself, and I don't think it should be taken for granted. So thank you to you and all your team for putting this together. Um, my presentation today is something that I've been working on recently. It's not going to sort of, I've done presentations before on the work that I've done with story, but I'm exploring some new territory here, and Atem already sort of foreshadowed a little bit of some of the things that I wanted to share with you today. But I can almost, let me give you the takeaway already. Let me tell you what I hope you're going to take away from this as a possibility to try something. The takeaway is to ask the question where more often maybe than you ask the question how, or more often you ask the question why. It's something I'm thinking about a lot these days. It's something about creating more space for our stories, and also to put stories of space that are already somehow secretly implanted in our language, at least in the English language, but I think it also applies to other languages, where we will say the ultimate concern we have about something, and it ultimate means the final, the last. When you think about definition, the word definition in English, finis, at the end, definition is about wrapping up, the end point. We'll, I was listening to this controversial trial yesterday, the commentary on on the cable TV, and they were talking about some of the witnesses being wanting to be presented as bottom feeders. And you think about space, there's top, there's bottom, there's first, there's last, there's shallow, there's deep. And somehow these spatial things are written into our language, expressing that position is connected to power. But that unless we somehow focus on that position, we miss maybe some of the invisible power that are contained in our stories. So now, I'm going to suggest now, and just a quick context, there's a great book by Simon Sinek that everyone has read, I'm sure has heard of, Start With Why. Part of this little presentation is having a conversation with Simon in terms of wanting to say, actually, I think we should start with where. And in fact, Simon, you've already used the word start, and start is where. So you're already starting with where when you start with why. But I want to unpack a little bit where, and in the slide show that Adam will line up in a second, it's just a question of saying, like, if stories take us on journeys, once upon a time, it came to pass that it's like we start somewhere, we move into that middle that Rain was talking about, that, complicated, really confronting sometimes. And then we come to the end. If the end place is different from the beginning place, then we could consider this metaphor or function that a story takes us on a journey, that a story transports us, as Michael White used to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly kind of run through. The outcome of our presentation is what opens up, what horizons open up if we step back and just ask, where are we? Not why are we or how are we? Even in this presentation, I know you folks have been listening, some of you, and you've heard the first presentation and the second presentation, and I'm just aware, where are you? You've had wonderful input from Rain, you've had wonderful input from Laura, and now you got me. And it's like, whoa, hang on, come on, let's take a breather here. Let's take a little breather here, because we need some space. And I think that's sometimes what our stories provide for us, and sometimes that's what our stories need. So let's just quickly go through the slideshow now. Are you in control of it, Artem, or am I in control of it? Maybe I am. Let me just see. No. Yes, I am. Okay.
Yeah,
So, all right. So I'm going to map out a journey of a story as a beginning, middle, and end. And I'm going to demonstrate that just mapping idea with the way I'm sort of marking this presentation. So that now we're at the beginning and you're thinking, like, what is this crazy Australian guy talking about? And how has it got to do with story? Well, let's just explore that. So I want to sort of say that, again, stories are journeys. Stories take us somewhere. They take us from here to there. And so there's already, when we use journey or travel, we're using a spatial metaphor. We're talking about maps. We're talking about somehow a geography of meaning. So what stories take us to the lighthouse that's providing the signal for the ship to avoid the reef? And what stories take us into the dark? I guess somehow let's map our stories in a sense and see where we start from and where they take us. Now, I think stories often begin with a sense of inquiry. I mean, certainly, a court case or something, but even just in general conversation or in our work, we have habitual mindsets of inquiry. Why did you do this? How will you get this done? What is this supposed to be? When will this be delivered? We have a whole battery of inquiry tools, and they elicit forth the stories often that are told to us. I always like, the model here in a sense is You look at the ancient storytellers, like someone like Rabbi Jesus, and someone asks Jesus, "Who is my neighbor, Rabbi?" And instead of him giving a definitional response, which is about the rabbinic law, he tells the story of a good Samaritan. So there's a question and there's a story. So, if you could reverse that and think, sometimes I think of a story as being told to me and I'm asking myself, what's the question? What question is this story trying to answer? Okay, so let's look at some of those traditional, what we're going to look at, what we're going to do today. If stories are triggered by inquiry or curiosity and they take us someplace, where does why take us? Why are you listening to this broadcast? If we follow that, where would that take us? How will you use the lessons from this wonderful conference? Where will that take us? And then what I'm pushing forward is, where does where take us? What does where do that's different from why and different from how, and invites different sorts of stories? So let's look at why. Well, and I'm saying, like, why often will push out the analytical, how will be the practical, and where will present to us the positional. So all right, let's look at this long and winding road that we're going to investigate. Where does why take us? Where does how take us? And where does where take us in terms of those kinds of stories? Okay, so let's dare to ask why. So I want you to think for a second, even in your last week or your last few weeks, or even today or yesterday, when have you asked yourself the question why? Why isn't this internet sort of stabilizing? Why is there so much traffic on the way to work today? Why is the weather so unpredictable? Why are the headlines screaming this? Think of the last time you asked a question about why. Think of the times you've asked why this week, and think of what the stories you've got in response. Your kid comes home from school with a bad report. Why didn't you do your homework? Jimmy, why didn't you do your homework? Oh, well, I got sick that day and I missed the instructions. And, remember I broke my computer and I couldn't get the exam. You get a story. Why? Why are you doing this? Why? So why is almost our favorite mindset of inquiry. And then this just like, why are you late? Why is the world so crazy right now? I mean, they've shut the metro train stations here locally. Why are they shut down? I've got to get a bus. Why are taxes so high? We've all just in America filled our taxes. And why is she coming? I mean, we're going to have a break. Why is she coming? Okay. So you pick your own question for a minute, even in your own mind. What would be a why question that you could just play with in your own mind and just see where it takes you? Now, because we have plenty of case studies, like, my goodness, remember, it was certainly Americans watching this after 9/11. Why were we attacked? There was a whole inquiry, the 9/11 Commission. Why were we attacked? Or even older people, maybe of my generation a little, that when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, the Warren Commission. Why was Kennedy assassinated? Was it a lone assassin? Was it a conspiracy? Was it the FBI? 2008, why did the economy collapse? And, all the housing market collapse. Or more recently, it's still an ongoing investigation. Why did a virus in China kill so many people? So in the public discourse, why somehow is the sort of tool that opens up, something's happened. We've got to find out why. We've got to find the story. How did we end up here? What went on? Who made the choices? All right. But even when you look at those 4 or 5 examples there, those of us who know, they're all controversial. I mean, no one really, who killed Kennedy? It's still widely discussed. Who killed Kennedy? 9/11, was it, the why takes us back into territory which is fairly contested, and lots of contesting stories. So let's look, where does why take us? Now, in that context, we're asking why at the end of it. Something's happened. It's come to an end, and the inquiry it's not going to undo it, but it might explain things. How come? And we want to know why, because something has to make sense. It doesn't have to make good, but it has to make sense. We seem to have low tolerance for not knowing things. We're allergic to mystery, even more than intolerant of iniquity. Like, why did it happen? But the pursuit of it is, we don't want 9/11 to happen again. We don't want an economic meltdown like 2008 ever to happen again. So our intention is to go forward, and we ask why. And then we come cartwheeling backwards, journeying backwards to unravel the sequence of events and choices that led to where we started the inquiry from. I mean, who done it? So it's just interesting. We want to create a better future, and we ask why, and then we head backwards. So, you know this. Why? Because of X. But then why X? Because of Y. Well, but why Y? Because of Z. But who's responsible for Z? Well, A was. Well, why was A allowed to run things if B was in charge? Well, B was out sick. C was relieving and didn't know the role, and so she deferred to A. Well, then what are we going to do? Let's dismiss A, let's retrain C, and let's caution B. And so the why becomes this chain of causation, cause, which when it comes to center on a person, soon becomes a blame, a search for responsibility, a search to blame somebody. It takes us backward in time, not forward. It often ends in blame. If we can punish, we feel it's worthwhile. We feel somehow, okay, we know who did it, and we know who to punish. We've made the problem into the person. It gives us a reason or a cause, but if we're searching for a solution, it gives us a reason and not necessarily a solution. They're not necessarily the same things. So if we habitually ask why, I have a sense that we habitually end up going backwards and habitually end up on a hunt for blame. I mean, we just don't want to know. We just want to know who to blame. And so long as it's not us. And this reflection for me is like, we're still dissecting in the United States conversation publicly the election of 2020. I mean, we just can't get out of it. Why did it happen? What's going on here? Let's have a court case. Let's have a royal commission. Let's have a congressional committee inquiring. It's just like, why? Where does it? So, so there's a direction that why this habitual mindset of inquiry, why? It takes us down a certain torrid, tragic path, I think, because we're stuck on always asking why. Thinking that it gives us a solution, but it doesn't necessarily. It gives us a reason, gives us a cause, it gives us a motive, but thinking it is the method to find a path forward when all the energy is going backwards. So I just think there's something about why. We keep asking why, but it somehow means that at the end we're going to look back, whereas in fact maybe we've got to be at the beginning looking forward, which then brings us to the next question is how. Okay. Think of how many times recently you've used the word how, asked the question how. How long is this meeting going to go for? How much is this going to cost? How will I know? How did you get here? How will we fix it? So, when we ask how, where does it take us? If why comes, when we ask why at the end of something, we're going to be looking back. Now, to be fair, Simon Sinek says, start with why. So when you ask why at the beginning, it's not about cause so much as purpose. So it's interesting. Why is positionally dependent. You ask why at the beginning, why are we going to do this? It's not about a because, well, it is a because, but it's the future. When you ask why at the end, it's looking back for a diagnosis, not a diagnosis, but a post-mortem sort of thing. So here comes, how comes before a task, a problem at the beginning. I mean, this is the culture of business, of leadership. It's the culture of this AmeriCorps program that I run, like getting things done. We're not going to ask why people are in great need. We're going to get it done. We're going to move in there and a blueprint for action. Don't waste words. And, some people, a lot of people in the scientific realm or engineering realm, this is their mindset. I mean, I'm sure some of you, like I have tried to go into NASA or some other big technical company and tried to get them to tell stories, and their mind is trained to how. How are we going to get a man to the moon? How are we going to get them back? How are we going to fix this? How are we going to overcome that problem? They're not into the why. They're into the how. And so where does how take us? I mean, how is going to, it's goal centered. Let's get it done, and it's done, and that's over. It's technology, it's machines, it's find a method, find a recipe. Maybe it's facing obstacles, the hero's journey. How do we overcome, but it resolves in a success or a failure, and know how get it done. If a culture, now, it seems to me that if a culture is asking how more than why, then we're not likely to get too many stories. Like let's, and part of this is in my tradition of like understanding solution-based therapy, like narrative therapy. Solution-based therapy and brief theory doesn't want to know that you are lonely because of what happened to you as a kid. It just wants to help you get more socially confident in the future. All right, let's just quickly wrap this up. So we're now in the middle. Let's move to the end. Where? Why am I going to say that where? When was the last time you asked where? Where are we right now on this? Where did we come from? Where might we end up? What is the ideal destination? Where are we headed? Where positions us in relational space? Where are we in between right now? Because one place is many different places depending upon what it's in between. Where did we come from to get here? Where are we headed from here? Are we in the right direction or not? Are we lost? I mean, they always have that survey, which keeps increasing in number, that 60-70% of Americans right now think the country's going in the wrong direction. But no one ever pulls out what that means, but it's certainly a survey data point that's always repeated time and time again. Are we nearly there, or are we a long way off? What is close by? What are we not in a position to even reach right now? So why does not have to? So let's again recap. A story takes us on a journey, and it's triggered by an inquiry, a curiosity. Why? Well, if it's something's happened and we ask why, it doesn't have to it takes us backwards to understand for reasons. But reasons are not stories, because they oversimplify experience into conclusions, or causes aren't necessarily stories. They impose a logic on human mystery. So why, I kind of feel, is going to take us back. How is going to take us forward, but it's going to take us, goal, finish, solution, closure. Whereas if a story is going to take us from here to here to here, then where is the question that's going to open up the dynamism and the relationships of close, far, near. What positions are we in? Where taps the movement of a story in its most dynamic force. It invites us to tell stories that map movement, change, growth, threat, confusion. So maybe we'll just stop there for a second, and I've got some wrap-up things. But maybe I'll give you an example of this. You see, I run an AmeriCorps program with 20 volunteers serving the neediest kids in the local school district. And they started last August, and it is now May. And so I always sort of map out their year as there's a beginning, which is full of creative energy. There's a middle, which is complicated energy and clarifying energy, and the ending, which is completion energy. And so when I ask you, why are you here? I know that that's a different answer, a different story at the beginning as it is in the middle. In the middle, it's not why are you here, it's why are you still here? Because things have got tough. You stayed with serving the neediest kids. And then at the end point, why are you here? It's kind of looking back and looking forward. So I believe that the question of why and how shift position in time and position in the story, and that where opens up that question. So in practical terms, then, in the middle, something's happening with the member and some complication is going on. I want to solve it because it's in the middle. It's good to have complications in the middle. But if someone comes to me this week and says, Paul, this is what's happening, all right, it may be urgent and we'll deal with it, but it's part of a different question now. Now it's part of completion. I'm not going to complicate the ending. I'm just going to complete the ending. That position, where are we? Where are we? That energy is a condition of position. At the beginning, there's all sorts of creative energy. In the middle, it gets complicated. You can expect that in a story. You can expect that if it's going to make a good story and a good memory. And at the end, it's meant to just completion. Wrap it up. Affirm yourself and validate the contribution you've kind of made. So I'm just wondering if there's any questions, any thoughts. We're at 25 minutes, I think. And, is any of that striking you? Maybe it's too theoretical, but just the question of asking where is America right now? If there's two grandfatherly figures running for president who are in their early 80s are in their 80s, where are we in terms of where we came from and where we're heading? That's different from a why, which can often give a static answer, or a how, which gives a method recipe answer. How are we going to do this? Where are we? And before we even ask why or even ask the how. Okay, so compared to where you started with this seminar, does any of this make sense? Are you curious? Are you lost? Are you confounded? How did this time come to pass for you before we wrap it up?
Oh, that was lovely. Interesting to see that we are in the ending of the beginning of the conference.
Yes, exactly.
Given that it's the second part of the first day, so there is a certain energy to it. I love this discussion. Thank you so much. Please, guys, weave in with the questions. We already have Madina saying that's a great angle, and definitely where matters and with whom. Carol is asking, how can we get American media to change perspective to where? I would love to hear your take on that.
Well, I mean, I'd love to unpack the story and find out where you are at in asking the question. But like, where are you coming from in terms of where that question locates you? But I think part of our technology, the fact that we can be talking to you in Russia, that have no idea that Russia is just such a vast territory of people and so on. Like, I just think the world has shrunk, and distance, space, it's in our language. It is deeply in our language, but it's kind of got lost. But it's in our power relationships. Are you at the top of the class or on the bottom of the class? Are you on top of this, Artem? Are you on top of this, or is it getting away from you? I need a definition for that. A definition meaning, let's put a boundary around it. When you take the English language, and I'm sure it's in other languages, you suddenly see that we've taken space and turned it into a conceptual abstraction. And we don't think of it. We're using spatial words, but we're not using. And what scares me, it hides power. It makes power invisible. Then it really makes power invisible. I don't know whether that answers your question, but I kind of think it links to the environmental issue, climate change, that the earth, that we're embodied people, beings. We have flesh and blood. We live in the earth, the soil, the trees, the air, the water. Like, we somehow almost we're invited to live in our heads, not in our bodies anymore. So part of this is getting back into space, near, far, fast, slow, inside, outside. So I think it opens up. So when someone asks a question, I mean, I do work in the Middle East, and someone's going to say, why did October the 7th happen? And I'm going to say, hang on, before you ask, I want to know where your why is coming from. Where are we? Where are we with this? And we're in the middle of something. What led up to it, and what is it going to lead to? We're in the middle. We're not at the end. We're in the middle. I think the election right now is going to have an apocalyptic flavor in America. The end. If you don't vote for this person, it'll be the end of democracy. If you don't vote for this person, it'll be the end of the world. And you asking where is, hang on, guys, step back, step back. We're in the middle. We're in the middle. It's like Dante's, Paradise Lost, in the middle of the woods on one darkened night. We're in the middle. So we can look back and then we can look forward. But the end, you see, like I've got two more pens. One left. Who wants the pen? Isn't it interesting? The position creates the urgency, which creates the pitch. It creates this pitch. It's like it's a Jesus pitch. The end of the world is happening now. You either repent or you get damned. You're running out of time. So moving things to the end, this apocalyptic sensibility, is a spatial technique. It's a spatial kind of strategy.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you for deepening the thought concentration in here. Love how this is actually brought into practice where in what you are doing. And we have a related question from Kevin. He's asking, how does wary, and how does where, I guess, build community? And I know that you've been practicing it for a long time, so maybe a comment on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, the research that's kind of says that proximity is really, really important. If an Arab family is living next to a Catholic family, living next to a Hispanic family, proximity is and I guess that was part of the strategy of the desegregation campaigns of the 50s and the 60s in the United States. This assumption that if black and white kids can actually be together, close to each other and stuff at school, that would break down barriers. So I think where is a pretty critical factor around building community. I just know in my when I researched my Irish ancestry in Galway in Ireland and discover back in the 1850s, 1840s, the Flemings lived next to the Harveys, lived next to the Costellos, and the Harvey girls married the Fleming boys who married the Costello girls. It's all, I'm sure it happens in other communities, obviously the same way, that proximity. But, where are we? Who's near? Who's far? And then the outreach. I mean, sometimes it's about movement, not about success. I want to get closer to them. I don't want to become, how do we move closer to an understanding of things? Sometimes I think we set goals, particularly in social analysis. We want to eradicate poverty. And this is the how. We're going to eradicate poverty. This is how you do it. I think the where is, wouldn't it maybe, let's get a little bit closer. Let's get further away from the endemic poverty that's ruining our cities, our inner cities. Let's move a little bit closer to a position where more people are getting an opportunity. Let's move the ball down the field. But that allows a bit more sort of compassion, allows more space into the story. Whereas this driven story is, we're going to fix it. The war on poverty. We're going to have a war on poverty. We're going to have a war on terror. We're going to have it suffocates a story from evolving into spaces that it's sort of, we may not have predicted it was going to take us. So I think where is a very, very important understanding, and that we don't put ourselves in a position. Another example. Like, I've done work in Israel, Palestine, and, a lot of work, we're trying to get Israelis and Palestinians together. But you know what? If you go to the Holy Land, you suddenly understand the geography makes it almost impossible. The people aren't really in a position to connect like that. So the work has got to be, how do we get people into a position where there's a growing possibility of some real enduring alliances? But to presume that we're there is to take place out of it. It's to say, like, we're going to get to the moon. No. We've got to, let's in 5 years' time get to the position where that opens up a horizon of possibility. So we don't, because I think a lot of failure happens, even in business. We're asking why and how. We're not asking where. And sometimes our ambitions are so far beyond our location. We're presenting ourselves as producing something that we're in no position to produce, because we don't ask ourselves, where are we? Are you in a position to offer that? You're going to transform the world? Great, go for it. But are you in a position to do that? Or should you, what do you need to do to move yourself into that position where that power might become more possible? But I think position is the hidden thing, because position shapes possibility. Where you are is kind of who you are.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of building the community, I like how you connected the how to the where. So how do we get to this position where building community is possible, if I hear you correctly?
Yeah, and I think that what I always say to them is, what's next is what you're next to. What's next is what you're next to, which means you may want to fly to Africa and go to Nigeria and help the orphans in Nigeria, but you don't know the neighbors in your own apartment. Like what's next is what you're next to. Proximity is really, really important around building alliances. But listen, I've got 5 minutes. Go on.
Yeah. I just got two more. One traditional question and one.
Yeah, and then I'll answer that, and then I've got 3 or 4 final slides just to wrap up, Tim. If we can.
Okay. Let's do it the other way. Go for the slides, and I will be back with the
all right. Yeah.
question.
Terrific. So just to wrap up, then, the magic. So I use this all the time in my work here. When I'm asking where, one of the tools that it allows me to use is what I call the magic question, which I talk about in the book that I wrote, one of the recent books I wrote. So the magic question is, and how to turn moments into momentum, which is like, what do I know from here, where we are right now, that I didn't know from there when we started, that knowing it and applying it maybe will increase my chances of getting to where I see more clearly I need to go. So there you put the 3 into play: here, there, and where. Sort of, where am I now? Artem has planned these conferences for a couple of years. You're right now in the end of day 1, Artem. What do you know from here that maybe you didn't know last week? That knowing it and applying it, it's going to increase what you're trying to do, and you're going to, you adjust things. So it's a learning cycle all the time around asking where. So here's a little way I kind of try and sum this up, and I put it on a poster. If I ask you why, I can blame you. If I ask you how, I can fix you. But if I ask you where, I can find you. And so that leads me to, we're at the ending, and then I just come back to, God's first question to human beings in the book of Genesis, chapter 3, Adam, where art thou? It's almost like paradigmatic that God's first question to human beings isn't who are you, why are you, how are you, when are you? It's like, where are you? I think that's, to me, that's, the first question that God asks human beings is, where are you? And so if people were interested in following up, as I say, I'm experimenting with this. It might sound a bit jumbled and crazy, and that's because it is. This is where I am at the beginning of some of this research. But here's my email address. And then there's a book I wrote about 3 years ago, which has some of these maps in, called Our Stories Rise Up, Remembering as Resilience, and The Presidential Plot, which is a 2008 book that's still relevant about how we elect a president, which has some of these ideas in it as well. So back to you, Tim, and to wrap it up.
Yeah, we still have 1 more minute for the traditional question.
Sure.
So I'm asking every speaker, a lighthouse can show us the danger and where it is, but a group of lighthouses can guide us out of the dangerous waters. What story would you like more people to tell, just like creating more lighthouses to make the world more filled with more light?
Well, you already kind of, a lighthouse is about navigation, not about negotiation, and I think there's the shift. So you're on song. You're right on song. You're like, thank you for reinforcing my theme, Tim. Like, and the check is in the mail. But I think I like to hear more stories that tell us where we are and not who we are. And I want leaders to tell us stories about. So quick story that I love to tell is it's World War II, and the British are being beaten. And finally, in North Africa, in Alamein, we beat back Rommel, and the Allies beat back the Panzer Group. And it's the first victory in World War II for the Allies, and the British kind of get really excited. And Churchill goes to a meeting, and he can see the enthusiasm, and wow, we're gonna do this. And he knows that he's got to tamper down this thing, because it's like, well, hang on. And he says, listen, this is not the beginning of the end. This is not the end, and this is not even the beginning of the end. But he says it may be the end of the beginning. It may be the end of the beginning, which tells to his people, listen, don't get to the anticipatory space that we're gazing into is a long journey. It's going to be hard, struggle, blood, sweat, tears is his other speech. But if you don't know where you are, then you don't know what to anticipate. You don't know whether it's a sprint. This is going to be over tomorrow, like they thought the Civil War was going to be in the United States. It was going to be over tomorrow, and it lasted 5 years. Or if you confuse a marathon with a sprint, then you got to know where you are.
So more leaders sharing their position. Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for this experiment that you brought in. I enjoyed it deeply. Please put some fires for Paul, and Paul, please feel free to stay and to join other talks.
Thank you very much, Artem, and thank you for all you do.
And
Thanks,
we'll
everybody.
be moving further. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. All right, our next talk of